born to roam. I love to travel.
This is Solo Travel Talk. Your solo travel advisor is Astrid Clements.
On the Caribbean coast of Colombia, atop the continent of South America, is Cartagena. Formerly the main port of the Spanish Empire, Cartagena served as a major center of political, religious, and economic activity. Today, Cartagena's walled city and fortress is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Astrid Clements, your solo travel advisor, is just back from Cartagena and apparently only made it home by the skin of her teeth. I'm producer Catherine O'Brien. If you follow Astrid on social media, which you should, you saw the pictures. Now let's hear the stories of Astrid in Cartagena. Astrid, I think everybody wants to know, how did you end up going to Cartagena to begin with?
Well, by bad luck, that turned into something wonderful. Basically, this last February, I was going to Las Vegas for the International Travel Product Show, and I had to catch a very early flight out of New Orleans. So I had to end up being at the airport at like 4:15 in the morning. I drug myself out of bed, got there, got to the airport, went to check in at the kiosk, and my reservation wouldn't take. And I was thinking, what's going on here? And it came up, you need to go see the check-in lady or the airline representative at the desk. So I went up there, and they said, well, I'm sorry, there are no seats on the plane. I said, what? I said, I've had this ticket for like 2 months. And I even had picked my seat. And she said, no, there's no seats on the plane. And she said, did you get the email, the check-in, et cetera? And something had slipped my mind, and I didn't do the check-in 24 hours ahead of time. But I thought, I have my seat arrangements. I mean, who is going to take this early flight? I mean, this is ridiculous. So I couldn't get on the plane. I couldn't believe it. My blood pressure went so high, but I maintained my cool, and I looked at the airline representative and I said, I have to be in Las Vegas by around noon. I said, this is a very important business trip. And I said, I just have to be there. And so I thought she was going to say, well, we've got a flight later on today at 5:30 or maybe tomorrow morning at the same time or something horrible. But she was so nice. I mean, I cannot believe how nice this representative was. She looked me in the face and she said, don't worry, let me see what I can do for you. So she got on her computer. She proceeded to get me on the next flight out of New Orleans to Las Vegas.
Woohoo.
Yes. And it would put me in Las Vegas, I think, right about 1:45, which was not too late. And I had extra baggage, no baggage fees. I mean, it was just seamless. She then gave me a $25 food voucher, which I went and had a fabulous cup of gumbo, which if you go to the New Orleans airport, there's a restaurant by the name of Dookie Chase. Lena Chase is a very famous New Orleanian. She's been having this restaurant for, I don't know, 60, 70 years. Wow. But this is soul food that is unbelievably good. It's in the airport. It's so good. But her gumbo is the best gumbo I've ever tasted anywhere in Louisiana or anywhere in the world. So I got that $25 voucher, even though it was early in the morning. As soon as they started serving gumbo, I had a cup of gumbo and I was happy. So as well as after that, getting me reoriented, I was so excited. She said, and we're going to give you a free round-trip ticket to anywhere that Spirit Airlines flies. And Spirit Airlines was the airlines that I had this issue with. And I didn't want to name it at first because I don't want people to think, oh, yes, Spirit, but I really love Spirit Airlines. I've never had a bad experience with Spirit Airlines. Now, they're not a luxury airlines, no frills, but just this VIP reaction to something that, granted, they're overbooking of the flight, but they handled this problem so well. I will always fly with Spirit. And I can tell you, I have had many incidents with major airlines that have been in the business for 25, 40 years that have just been so neglectful and downright abusive.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's just terrible. It's like, you're tough luck. I mean, get out of here. If you can't roll with the punches, don't fly. But I was astounded how they treated me. But that's how I got my ticket to Cartagena. And basically, what was so exciting about it is, well, to me, is I had been wanting to go to Cartagena for about the last 3 years. It just never kind of worked. And then when this happened and I looked at their flight routes and I saw Spirit goes to Cartagena, I said, well, Astrid's going to Cartagena. To end this little saga, basically, I used this bad luck that turned into good luck to get me to Cartagena, as well as this is the first time I've been to South America, the South American continent. So I killed 2 birds with 1 stone and didn't have to pay for the ticket.
You see, you live this charmed life because I know so many people, even I've had these experiences. And I know you just said you've had these experiences too, where I've been bumped off of flights or whatever, and there's nothing. There's no VIP treatment, no gumbo, no nothing.
I guess it was just maybe one of my guardian angels intervening. I don't know how you explain it, but I have right here written down travel tip. If something like this happens to you, be extra nice and courteous to the airline check-in personnel. And you really might end up with a free ticket because you know that these people are on the front lines of so much stress and so much high anxiety that their job is about as difficult as it gets. They're trained from their corporate offices to react in all different situations a certain way. But there's some that are much more compassionate and engaged and have more flexibility. And certain airlines do. We all know Southwest built their whole airlines with a great attitude. They were going to love everybody. And let me tell you, it built their airlines, and Spirit has that same kind of happy, look, don't worry about it. This is bad, but we're going to fix this. And kudos to Spirit Airlines. That's all I can say.
Okay. So good plugs for Spirit Airlines.
Yeah, but this was the first time I had flown with Spirit Airlines.
Oh, wow. So they really could have gone south there.
Yeah, and I told that flight, I said, I was actually looking forward to taking a flight on Spirit Airlines to see what I thought about it. Oh, boy. From that point on, she didn't want my first experience to be bad.
Maybe that was part of it, too. Listeners, I know that Astrid came back and she had said Cartagena was on her top 10. So I want to start getting into and hear all about it. When I started to look into the city for this show, I noticed that Cartagena seems like the kind of place that is so dense with history that a visitor can't experience all of it without being steeped in history. So is that correct? And how did the history of Cartagena weave into your trip?
Well, Catherine, both of these questions are excellent questions to get into this particular podcast. And I'll have to start by saying, or I have to admit, I really didn't pay any attention to the history of Cartagena when I was doing my pre-trip research. I was really more focused on what I wanted to do, where I wanted to eat, what I wanted to buy or to shop, and just basically the sleep, eat, see, do, and shop kind of information. So all that really stuck in my mind about the history is that basically Cartagena was first founded by the Spanish conquistadors, or the exploration of the New World, and there were 3 indigenous populations that were there at the very beginning of its history: the Native Americans, the Spaniards, and then also a little bit later, the African Americans. Also, I knew it had kind of a Caribbean culture and a Caribbean history because it was an important port city on the northern coast of South America. So that's really about all I kind of absorbed in terms of the history before I went. So when I arrived in Cartagena, and especially when I entered the walls of the old city, and you will see in Cartagena, it has a complete wall around their original old city of Cartagena. Now you've got Boca Grande, which is kind of on another little island that's connected really to where Cartagena is, that has all these fabulous high rises. It looks like Miami Beach. And then there are other areas that Cartagena is starting to spread out outside of the city walls. But the inside the city is still very vibrant, and people live there, work there, etc. So when you go into the old city, immediately you are just shocked by the beautiful architecture, and you realize this was a very important place. I mean, you know that from how gorgeous this place is, that they had to have had a lot of money going through here, a lot of power going through here, and you just don't have this unless that's the way it was. And then once my cab dropped me off at the hotel, I walked in and I thought, oh my God, this is just beautiful, this hotel. And the doorman greeted me, and I told him I was checking in. So he went and he sat me down at this VIP desk and began to check me in. And the gentleman talking to me about my stay, et cetera, was telling me, actually, this hotel used to be a convent, one of the oldest convents in the New World. And so some of the whole basic structure, which the hotel has been built around and on top of, was this gorgeous Spanish Catholic convent. So here I'm coming to a beautiful 5-star hotel that's actually was a convent. So the point being is, here I'm in this gorgeous piece of architecture that was part of the history of how Cartagena evolved, because it really is a city that was very Catholic, and it still is today. And the Catholic Church had a lot to do with its development. But once I checked in and decided I was going to start walking, and this is kind of a long answer to your question, but I want you to get the feel for the history and how everything about Cartagena is interwoven in the history. And it shows you why the culture is so rich, and there's so much just really good quality there and good vibe. So I said, well, I'm just going to kind of walk and get lost and kind of see if I can get my bearings. Maybe I'll even catch a hop on and hop off bus afterwards. But as I was walking through the streets, I really started to see the strong influence, first of all, of the Catholic Church, because it seemed like every 5 to 8, maybe 10 blocks, there was another gorgeous church and a square in front of it. It reminded me very much of how Europe is laid out in many of the countries. There's a neighborhood church and a square in front of it, and the square is a place where people commune and congregate and have festivities, etc. And then the church is part of their whole life. Well, that's still very much very real in Cartagena. And I remember that first day, I went into the first church and they happened to be saying Mass, and I just sat there through the Mass. It was so beautiful. I was raised a Catholic. It felt like church that I used to go to. It's a throwback almost to a time that doesn't exist anymore in lots of parts of the very modern world. But you can really start to feel that old world Cartagena. Besides the influence and the proliferation, basically, of the Catholic Church in the New World, the expansion of the Spanish Empire in search of gold and their trade route developments was really the foundation of the history of Cartagena. And it totally cemented their place in the world. The Spaniards came as early as 1533, so that was before they went to St. Augustine in North America. And why they came to this particular area, it's first of all the northernmost port in South America, but where it is exactly, it's kind of inland and it's away from the strong currents.
Protected.
So it's protected from the weather. Very, very strategic. So this is where the gold could be mined from all over South America. It could be shipped, stored, traded, or hidden safely. Because you could kind of get that feeling, boy, I bet there was a lot of gold down there in this location. So it became really the most important port in the New World. And it really is today still is the most important port in South America. So it's never lost that economic foundation as well as it's part of their history, that maritime commerce, etc.
Trade, yeah.
And like I said, no hurricanes come here. If you can believe that, I was so astounded because I asked somebody, because I was actually thinking about buying a condo there because it's very affordable. That's one thing about Cartagena. It is still so affordable. For Americans and the American dollar being as strong as it is, oh gosh, you can buy condos for $80,000. And I mean nice condos on the Caribbean. It's pretty amazing. But I was asking this one lady, I said, well, what about the hurricanes? She said, hurricanes don't come here. I said, oh, come on. You're on the Caribbean. She said, no, hurricanes do not come here. And then I said, well, what about flooding? She said, sometimes we have a little flooding. But we all have those kick-up water barriers that they put. So if that happens, we're prepared for it and we're used to it.
Just get the condo on the 3rd floor.
Yeah. So with all that, it just brought great wealth and development to Cartagena, which is obvious in the gorgeous Spanish colonial architecture that's been preserved and refurbished. And then also with that came all the pirates and the corsairs and the different threats of expansionist powers of British and all that. So the Spaniards, they did not want to lose Cartagena. So they were the reason why that wall was built around the city and the castle and the fort. And because of these fortifications, it protected Cartagena. It protected their way of life, their buildings, their businesses, etc. So all of that history is intertwined in what you will experience when you go to Cartagena. And then one other last little history thing. It was actually the first Colombian city to declare its independence from Spain. So that just shows you that Cartagena, there is something about, and I couldn't totally pinpoint everything that makes it so happy. The sensualness comes from some of the different, I guess you would say, races that have ended up living there and intermarrying. And then, of course, the wonderful balmy breezes coming off of the Caribbean Sea. But it is a place where the minute you get there, you feel good. Your mood completely changes. Whatever is kind of dragging you down, oh, you forget about it. It just goes out the window. So to really more specifically answer your question, I learned about and absorbed Cartagena's history hourly as I wandered through the streets, visiting the churches and the museums, eating at the fabulous restaurants that specialized in local cuisine, shopping in their street markets and even some of their governmentally owned artisan specialty stores, even the high-end boutiques. There's just something about Cartagena that is so distinctive, yet cosmopolitan without being off-putting or whatever. I mean, I can't imagine anybody going there and not taking to the culture, to the fashion, to the food. In fact, lots of people have said that there's a magic about Cartagena. And there was a famous Nobel Prize Colombian author. He was really the only author that's ever won the Nobel Prize from Colombia. His name was Gabriel Garcia Martinez. And he writes about Cartagena in his novels because he really loved Cartagena. He said There is nowhere else like Cartagena in the world. And he is so right. There is nowhere else like this. It is something about it. So my suggestion for those who are thinking about traveling to Cartagena, or those of you who've already booked your ticket, familiarize yourself with its history and its fabulous culture before you go. Don't do what I did, that you take it in daily kind of by osmosis. And if you go there knowing a little bit more to what you would expect and why it is the way it is, I think it will come alive even more to you. Plus, if you have time, also read maybe one of Gabriel Garcia Martinez's novels, because it'll really help prepare you for that magic quality about it. It's an intangible quality that you really can't totally pinpoint, but it's everywhere. And you feel it. You feel it. So that's a long answer to the history question, but the history is evident everywhere. So if you know a little bit more about it before you go in the culture, I think you will even love your time there more.
I have to say, I referred to your pictures on social media before when we were starting the show. I saw places that looked like the Caribbean. I saw things that looked like Barcelona. The word you used, old world, really kind of stands out. When I read, oh, this was the headquarters of the Spanish Empire in the New World, I was like, oh, that makes sense based on what I was seeing.
Yes. And it feels like old world, but it's not like passe at all. It's kind of like your flamboyant, but warm, intelligent, and very aristocratic grandmother or something. I mean, everybody loves her because she's everything all at one time. and she just looks a little different or something. There's something just totally unique about it that nobody cannot deny how it really is wonderful.
Do you think Cartagena is on a lot of people's radar?
Not yet, but it is getting there. And like, really, I would have never traveled to anywhere in Colombia, except I started reading the last 5-6 years ago that Bogota was becoming much more on the travel destination list. I'd seen them in my magazines and on the internet, as well as Medellin. Yeah. And then Cartagena. And I would read them with a grain of salt. I said, well, yeah, that's probably nice, but they're probably still so run down and not enough there really that for somebody who's traveled all over to be motivated to go. But then I started seeing so much more about Colombia, specifically Cartagena, that it was so wonderful. And I really began to pay attention to it. And then my daughter, she travels almost as much as I do, not quite. She said, oh, Cartagena is a fabulous place, Mommy. You need to go there. And when she said that, I thought, well, maybe everything I'm reading is true. So that's one of the reasons why I went. But I still think most people are reticent to go there because, number one, the safety. All we heard about Colombia for about 20 years was it was a mafioso type of country run by very violent drug cartels. The economy really wasn't very good for a solo traveler or any tourist. It was just too dangerous to have any fun. And there wasn't really that much there. That's the way people felt about it. So I didn't see any evidence of any of that. I have to tell you, I felt perfectly safe walking on the streets at 11:30 at night. I mean, Cartagena is so safe. I did not find anything. Now, there are pockets that I wouldn't, because I did stay in the nicest area. But I didn't feel any of that threat or anything like that. But, I'm careful too. But still, it's not anything that it used to be. So I think that's the biggest reasons why people don't go. The safety, and maybe they think, well, there's not that much there.
Perception, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a rundown Caribbean place. I'm going to go somewhere really nice. I would think people would think it was probably not as nice as Cuba. I bet you it is nicer than Cuba at this point, because a lot of money has been spent in refurbishing that old fabulous architecture, which I'm sure is similar to Cuban architecture. You go into all of the buildings have these wonderful open air courtyards where people eat or congregate, or if it's in a hotel, usually the pool is in the middle. But, they have a real indoor-outdoor type of lifestyle in their homes. So there's some of those old homes and mansions are, oh my God, they're just absolutely so fabulous, because you think, oh my God, maybe in my next life I'll be lucky enough to live like this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll wrap up this podcast by saying Cartagena is one of the most beautiful solo travel destinations I've ever had the good fortune to travel to. I'm very serious about that. It's in my top 10 for sure. This place is so wonderful. If you want to go somewhere where you just relax and have good vibes all around you and rejuvenate and have fun, good food, go to Cartagena. It's absolutely wonderful. And I wrote here on my little notes, it's colorful. The people are happy and friendly. The city, especially the old town, the architecture is gorgeous. It reminds me kind of the French Quarter. I envision Cuba to kind of be like this, but Cartagena probably is even nicer, I'm sure now, because Cuba hasn't fully redone itself and rejuvenated itself. It's slowly, but Cartagena has. They are on the move to make that city just gorgeous. All these buildings are multicolored, and they have these gorgeous handmade wooden grills over the windows and beautiful balconies, and these flowers that drip over the balconies, and flowers that go across the street on top of cars go under, and flowers over the big doors. I mean, there's just flowers everywhere in Cartagena. So it's totally beautiful. I told you, those magnificent churches, even if you don't, or you're not someone who is a Christian or practicing Catholic or any religion for that matter, the buildings themselves are so beautiful. I loved going in the churches. Fabulous food, fun and affordable shopping, safe and really highly walkable. And those two things, the walkability and the safety of a city for solo travelers, is one of the key things, whether a place is really a good place for a solo traveler to go. Because if you are put in vulnerable situations too much, having to use cabs and various transportation sources, that's when things can kind of go wrong. If you can walk a lot and you're safe walking, that's good. And this is, to me, a real plus. It is not overrun by tourists yet, which is fabulous. I didn't see very many Americans because I'm sure they're still thinking about Colombia with the Pablo Escobar days. You don't see any of that. I felt totally safe. There were Europeans there, but I didn't see any Asians, or the tourism is just starting there. So that's another reason why it's so good. Most of the tourists there, I would say, are from South America. So what more can I say but treat yourself to a Caribbean getaway and travel to Cartagena, Colombia. If you found this podcast valuable, I would appreciate if you would give us that big thumbs up, a share, or if you have any comments. We love comments. But most importantly, subscribe, because when you subscribe, that pushes the broadcast out to a larger audience in the podcast world. And the bigger the audience, really, more people get the information, are informed, and I would sincerely appreciate it. So I'll say goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Listeners, if you find yourself with your own amazing complimentary ticket to anywhere that Spirit Airlines flies and you choose to go to Cartagena, or if you just go the traditional route and buy your ticket, you are still going to have to pack your bags. Well, Astrid has something for you to make that packing just a tiny bit easier. She has an amazing packing list. It's complimentary. All you have to do is go to astridtravel.com. Right there on the very home page, you can put in your email and download that packing list right away. A quick little show note about next week's show. We're going to get into more Cartagena, and we're going to hear some of Astrid's highlights and one distinct lowlight. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, all of the finer places that podcasts can be found. We love our listeners. We love our subscribers. We love people who reach out to Astrid with their questions about solo travel. You can do that, too, at her website, astridtravel.com. And as I mentioned in the start of the show, Astrid has some amazing pictures of her travels to Cartagena. You just have to follow her on social media. She's on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. She would love to see you there. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week with more Cartagena on Solo Travel Talk.
Thank you for listening to Solo Travel Talk. Follow Astrid on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. To learn more about Astrid or Solo Travel Advisors, visit her website, astridtravel.com.